A night of chaos. Victoria Hayes adjusted the silk scarf around her neck as she stepped into the grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel. The annual spring charity auction was the biggest event of the season, and as the assistant curator at the Hartwell Museum, she had been invited to represent her institution. The room sparkled with crystal chandeliers, and elegantly dressed guests mingled while servers carried trays of champagne. She had spent weeks preparing for tonight. Her navy blue dress was simple but elegant, chosen specifically to look professional rather than flashy. This was a networking opportunity, a chance to connect with potential donors and art collectors who could support the museum's upcoming exhibitions. Victoria accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server and scanned the room. She recognized several board members, a few local politicians, and some faces she had seen in business magazines. The auction would begin in 30 minutes, and she wanted to make at least 3 meaningful connections before then. The storm arrives. She was speaking with Mrs. Patterson, a generous museum patron, when the atmosphere in the room suddenly shifted. A ripple of excitement moved through the crowd like wind across water. Heads turned toward the entrance, and Victoria heard whispered conversations erupt around her. "Is that Jonathan Pierce? I heard he just closed a deal worth millions. Did you see the article about his breakup? So dramatic." Victoria glanced toward the entrance and saw a tall man entering the ballroom. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, and his presence seemed to command attention without any effort. Dark brown hair, strong jawline, and an expression that suggested he would rather be anywhere else. Jonathan Pierce. She knew the name from financial news. His company had developed revolutionary software that protected digital information for major corporations. At 32, he was already worth more than most people could imagine. But Victoria also remembered something else. Just last week, there had been headlines about his former girlfriend claiming he had abandoned their relationship for his career. The media had painted him as cold and heartless. When worlds collide. Victoria turned back to her conversation with Mrs. Patterson, determined to stay focused on her purpose for being here. She had no interest in celebrity drama or wealthy entrepreneurs. Her world was art, history, and the quiet satisfaction of preserving beauty for future generations. 20 minutes later, she excused herself to visit the restroom. The hallway outside the ballroom was quieter, decorated with expensive artwork and plush carpeting. She was checking her phone for messages when she heard rapid footsteps behind her. "Excuse me, I need your help." Victoria turned to find Jonathan Pierce standing there, slightly out of breath. Up close, he was even more imposing than he had appeared from across the room. His gray-blue eyes held an urgency that caught her off guard. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" Victoria asked, taking a small step back. "No, but I'm about to do something terrible, and I apologize in advance." His voice was rushed, almost panicked. Before Victoria could process his words, she heard shouting from around the corner. "Mr. Pierce! Jonathan! Just one statement about the allegations." A group of photographers and reporters came rushing down the hallway, cameras raised and voices calling out questions. Jonathan glanced at them, then back at Victoria, and she saw genuine fear in his expression. "The kiss that changed everything. Please forgive me," he whispered. Then his hand gently touched her waist, and he leaned down and kissed her. Victoria's mind went blank. Her first instinct was to push him away, but his touch was surprisingly gentle, almost respectful despite the circumstances. His lips were warm, and for a brief moment, the chaos around them seemed to fade into silence. Camera flashes exploded like fireworks. The hallway filled with clicking shutters and excited voices. "Jonathan, who is she? How long have you been together? Is this your response to the interview?" Reality crashed back into Victoria's awareness. She pressed both hands against Jonathan's chest and shoved him away with more force than she knew she had. Her face burned with embarrassment and anger. "What is wrong with you?" she demanded, her voice shaking. Jonathan held up both hands in a gesture of surrender, but his body remained positioned between her and the advancing photographers. I know that was completely inappropriate. I panicked. They have been following me for days, and I saw you standing here, and I thought if they believed I was with someone, they might leave me alone. So you assaulted a stranger? Victoria's hands clenched into fists at her sides. You're absolutely right to be angry. His voice was calmer now, though she could see tension in his shoulders. I have no excuse. That was wrong, and I am truly sorry. The aftermath. The photographers pressed closer, still shouting questions. Jonathan turned to face them, and his entire demeanor changed. The apologetic man disappeared, replaced by someone who radiated authority and control. Gentlemen, you have your photos. This is a private charity event, and you are not invited. Security is already on their way. I suggest you leave before this becomes a legal issue. Something in his tone made the reporters hesitate. They exchanged glances, took a few more photos from a distance, then slowly began to retreat down the hallway. Jonathan waited until they had disappeared around the corner before turning back to Victoria. I understand if you want to file charges, he said quietly. That would be completely justified. But please allow me to at least give you my contact information so I can help with any consequences this causes you. He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket and held it out. Victoria stared at the card without taking it. Her heart was still racing, and she could not decide if she was more angry or confused. This man had kissed her without permission in front of cameras, and now those photos were probably already spreading across the internet. Her carefully planned evening, her professional reputation, her quiet life, all of it had just been thrown into chaos by one impulsive moment. I don't want your money, she said coldly. I want you to understand that you cannot just do whatever you want because you're wealthy and desperate. You're absolutely right. Jonathan lowered his hand but did not put the card away. Would you allow me 5 minutes to explain? There's a private lounge just down this hall. It's quiet, public enough that you will feel safe, and you can leave whenever you want. A difficult decision. Victoria wanted to walk away. Every logical part of her brain screamed that she should return to the ballroom, find security, and report what had happened. But something in Jonathan's expression stopped her. Beneath the expensive suit and polished exterior, he looked genuinely distressed. Not manipulative or entitled, just honestly sorry. And Victoria had always had trouble ignoring people who seemed to genuinely need help, even when they had caused their own problems. 5 minutes, she said firmly. And if you try anything else, I will scream loud enough to bring every security guard in this building. Understood completely. Jonathan gestured toward a door further down the hallway, maintaining careful distance as they walked. As Victoria followed him, she wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. But curiosity had always been both her greatest strength and her most dangerous weakness. And despite everything, she found herself wanting to understand what could drive someone to make such a desperate choice. The private lounge was exactly as Jonathan had described, quiet, well-lit, and visible through glass doors to anyone passing by. They sat in chairs across from each other, and Jonathan took a deep breath before beginning to speak. What Victoria did not know was that this 5-minute conversation would change both of their lives in ways neither of them could imagine. Jonathan Pierce sat across from Victoria Hayes in the private lounge, his hands folded on his knees. Through the glass doors, they could see hotel staff passing by occasionally, which made Victoria feel slightly safer. She had positioned herself closest to the exit, and her phone was in her hand, ready to call for help if needed. I'm going to be completely honest with you, Jonathan began, his voice quieter than before. My life has been falling apart for the past 2 weeks, and tonight I made it infinitely worse by dragging you into my mess. Victoria said nothing, waiting for him to continue. She noticed that despite his obvious wealth and power, he looked exhausted. There were shadows under his eyes, and the confident posture he had displayed in the hallway had crumbled into something more human. My former girlfriend, Natasha Drummond, gave an interview to Celebrity Insider magazine last Monday, he continued. She claimed that I was emotionally distant, that I cared more about my company than our relationship, and that I broke her heart without any warning. The article painted me as a villain who used her for social appearances and then discarded her when she was no longer useful. Was any of it true? Victoria asked, her tone neutral. Jonathan met her eyes directly. Some of it. I did prioritize my work over our relationship. I did fail to give her the attention she deserved. But the breakup was mutual, or so I thought. We had been growing apart for months, and when we finally talked about it, she seemed relieved to end things. I had no idea she felt differently until that article appeared. The media storm. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that seemed unconscious. Within 24 hours, I went from being a relatively unknown tech entrepreneur to being the face of wealthy men who treat women badly. My company's investors started calling, worried about reputation damage. Clients questioned whether they wanted to be associated with someone accused of being heartless. And photographers started following me everywhere. Victoria felt a small stirring of sympathy but pushed it away. His problems did not justify what he had done to her. That still does not explain why you thought kissing a stranger was a reasonable solution. It was not reasonable. It was panic. Jonathan looked genuinely ashamed. I have been dealing with this pressure for days, trying to let it blow over naturally. My public relations team advised me to stay quiet, to not respond to the allegations, to let the news cycle move on. But the photographers kept following me, and tonight they cornered me at a charity event I have supported for 5 years. I saw them coming down that hallway, and I saw you standing there looking calm and confident, and my brain just shorted out. He paused, then added quietly, I thought if they saw me with someone else, someone who was not Natasha, they would stop trying to paint me as a heartbroken villain. I did not think about what it would do to you. I only thought about escaping the moment. The uncomfortable truth. Victoria set her phone on the small table between them, though she kept it within easy reach. Those photos are probably already online. By tomorrow morning, people are going to want to know who I am. My name, my job, my entire life is about to become public because of your 5 seconds of panic. I know. Jonathan pulled out his phone and tapped the screen a few times, then turned it to show her. This was posted 17 minutes ago. Victoria looked at the screen and felt her stomach drop. The photo showed the two of them in the hallway, captured at the exact moment of the kiss. The angle made it look romantic rather than forced, with Jonathan's hand gently cradling her face and Victoria's eyes closed. The headline read, Tech billionaire Jonathan Pierce's mystery woman, who captured his heart. There are already 6 more articles, Jonathan said, pulling his phone back. Entertainment sites, business blogs, even a few legitimate news outlets. They are all asking the same questions. Who are you? How did we meet? How long have we been together? Victoria felt cold dread settling over her. This is going to ruin my career. I work at a museum. I am supposed to be serious and professional. Nobody is going to take me seriously when they find out I am the woman who was photographed kissing Jonathan Pierce at a charity event. I am going to fix this, Jonathan said firmly. My legal team is already prepared to send cease and desist letters to any outlet that publishes your personal information without permission. My public relations firm will release a statement saying that you are a private citizen who deserves respect and privacy. And I will personally compensate you for any professional damage this causes. An unexpected offer. Victoria shook her head. I do not want your money. I want my normal life back. I understand. But I have a proposal that might help both of us. Jonathan leaned forward slightly. The media has already decided we are together. Fighting that narrative will keep both of us in the headlines for weeks, maybe months. Every denial will just make them more curious. Every attempt to separate our stories will generate more articles. What are you suggesting? What if we give them what they want? Jonathan spoke carefully, as if testing each word before saying it. What if we pretend to date for a short period of time? 6 weeks, maybe 2 months. We make a few public appearances together, attend some events, let photographers see us looking happy. The story becomes boring because it is no longer mysterious. Then we quietly end things, claim it just did not work out, and both of us can move on with our lives. Victoria stared at him in disbelief. You want me to fake date you? After you just assaulted me in a hallway? I know how it sounds. But think about the alternative. If we try to fight this story, reporters will dig into your background. They will contact your friends, your family, your colleagues. They will try to create drama where none exists. But if we control the narrative, if we give them a simple, boring love story, they will lose interest much faster. A difficult consideration. Victoria wanted to refuse immediately. The entire idea was ridiculous. She was a museum curator, not an actress. She had no interest in being part of some elaborate deception just to protect a billionaire's reputation. But as much as she hated to admit it, Jonathan had a point. The media would not simply forget about those photos. They would investigate her, publish articles about her, possibly even show up at the museum asking questions. Her quiet, private life would become public entertainment. What exactly would this arrangement involve? She asked slowly. Jonathan seemed to sense her hesitation and spoke more confidently. Nothing inappropriate, I promise. We would need to be seen together in public occasionally. Dinner at restaurants where photographers tend to gather. Maybe attend 1 or 2 charity events as a couple. We would need to seem comfortable with each other, so perhaps we should actually get to know each other first. But everything would be completely professional and respectful. And after 6 weeks? We release a joint statement saying we realized we were better as friends. No drama, no blame, just a mutual decision. The story dies, and we both go back to our normal lives. Victoria picked up her phone and pulled up one of the articles Jonathan had mentioned. The comments section was already filling with speculation. People were analyzing every detail of the photo, trying to guess her identity. Someone had already suggested she looked like someone from the art world. The weight of decision. I need to think about this, Victoria said finally. This is not a decision I can make in 5 minutes. Of course. Take all the time you need. Jonathan stood and pulled out his business card again, setting it on the table between them. My personal number is on there. Call me anytime, day or night, whether you decide to accept my proposal or if you just need help managing the media attention. Victoria picked up the card and studied it. Expensive paper, minimalist design, just his name and contact information. Nothing flashy or pretentious. I am sorry, Jonathan said again as she stood to leave. I know I have already said it multiple times, but I need you to know that I genuinely regret putting you in this position. Whether you accept my proposal or not, I will do everything in my power to protect your privacy and minimize the damage I have caused. Victoria nodded and walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. Why were you at this charity event? It seems like something you would avoid if you were trying to stay out of the public eye. A sad smile crossed Jonathan's face. This charity funds medical research for children with rare diseases. My younger sister died from one when I was 18. I have supported them for 10 years, and I was not going to let some bad publicity stop me from honoring her memory. The answer surprised Victoria. It added a layer of depth to this man who had seemed like nothing more than a reckless billionaire minutes ago. A sleepless night. Victoria returned to the ballroom and somehow made it through the rest of the evening, though she could barely focus on conversations. She gave her excuses early and took a taxi home to her small apartment in the Arts District. Once alone, she collapsed onto her couch and finally let herself process everything that had happened. She pulled up her laptop and searched her own name. Nothing yet, but she knew it was only a matter of time. Then she searched Jonathan Pierce and spent an hour reading about him. His company, Pierce Security Systems, had indeed revolutionized data protection. He had started it at 25 with money borrowed from friends and family, and had built it into a major corporation through innovation and relentless work. He donated heavily to medical research and education programs. He rarely gave interviews and seemed to prefer staying out of the spotlight. The articles about Natasha Drummond's interview were harsh. They portrayed Jonathan as someone who used people and discarded them. But reading between the lines, Victoria noticed that Natasha's quotes seemed carefully crafted for maximum emotional impact. Every statement was designed to make her look like a victim and him look like a monster. Victoria's phone rang. Her best friend Lily Chen. "Please tell me you are okay," Lily said immediately. "I just saw some photos online and I swear one of them looks like you kissing Jonathan Pierce at the Riverside Hotel." Victoria sighed. "It is a very long story. I am coming over. Do not make any major life decisions until I get there." A friend's perspective. 20 minutes later, Lily arrived with ice cream and wine. Victoria told her everything while they sat on the floor of her living room, and Lily listened without interrupting until the story was finished. "So let me make sure I understand," Lily said finally. "A billionaire kissed you without permission, then offered to fake date you to fix the mess he created, and you are actually considering it? It sounds worse when you say it like that." "Because it is worse." Lily took a spoonful of ice cream directly from the container. "But I also understand why you are thinking about it. Those photos are not going away, and the media can be ruthless when they want a story." Victoria hugged a pillow to her chest. "What would you do?" "Honestly? I would probably say yes, but with very strict boundaries. Written agreement, clear timeline, rules about physical contact. Make it a business arrangement, not a favor." Lily pointed her spoon at Victoria. "And I would require him to make a substantial donation to the museum. If you are going to help save his reputation, the museum should benefit." The suggestion made Victoria smile despite everything. That was very practical thinking. "But you need to be careful," Lily continued, her tone becoming serious. "Fake dating sounds simple until real feelings get involved. You are going to spend time with this man, get to know him, maybe even start to like him. What happens then?" "Then I remember that this is just a business arrangement and keep my feelings separate from the situation," Victoria said, though even she could hear the uncertainty in her voice. The decision. Victoria spent the rest of the night thinking about Jonathan's proposal. She made a list of pros and cons, trying to approach it logically rather than emotionally. By morning, she had reached a decision. She called the number on Jonathan's business card. He answered on the second ring. "Victoria. I was hoping you would call. I have conditions," she said without preamble. "If I agree to this arrangement, it needs to be done my way with clear rules and boundaries." "Of course. Whatever you need. I want everything in writing. The timeline, the expectations, the rules about physical contact. This is a business arrangement, nothing more." "Agreed. I want your company to make a donation to the Hartwell Museum. $50,000 for their education programs." There was a pause, then Jonathan spoke with what sounded like respect in his voice. "Make it 100,000, and we have a deal." Victoria felt a small thrill of satisfaction. Maybe this arrangement would not be entirely terrible if she could negotiate like this. "One more thing," she said. "We need to actually get to know each other if this is going to be believable. That means real conversations, not just posing for cameras." "I was hoping you would say that." Jonathan's voice warmed slightly. "Would you like to have dinner tomorrow night? Somewhere private where we can talk without interruption?" Victoria looked at the business card still sitting on her coffee table. She was about to step into a completely unfamiliar world, all because of one unexpected kiss in a hallway. Dinner sounds fine. Text me the address. Thank you, Victoria. I promise I will make this as painless as possible. After ending the call, Victoria sat in silence for a long moment. She had just agreed to fake date a billionaire. 6 weeks of pretending to be someone she was not, all to protect both of their reputations. What could possibly go wrong? The first real conversation. Victoria arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, a habit she had developed during years of professional meetings. The address Jonathan had texted her led to a small Italian place tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, far from the trendy downtown areas where photographers usually lurked. The exterior was modest, with warm lights glowing through frosted windows and the scent of garlic and fresh bread drifting into the evening air. Inside, the atmosphere was intimate without being romantic. Small tables with white tablecloths, soft classical music playing in the background, and an older couple running the place who greeted her with genuine warmth. Jonathan had reserved a corner table that offered privacy while still being visible to the rest of the restaurant. He arrived exactly on time, wearing dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made him look less like a billionaire and more like a regular person. When he saw Victoria, his expression shifted from nervous tension to something resembling relief. "You came," he said, pulling out her chair. "I was half afraid you would change your mind." "I considered it about 15 times today," Victoria admitted, settling into her seat. "But I already told my boss about the arrangement, and she was surprisingly supportive once I explained the museum donation." Jonathan sat across from her and smiled slightly. "Smart negotiating, by the way. I should have expected that from someone who deals with art collectors and museum boards." Breaking the ice. The owner, Mrs. Castellano, came to their table personally and recommended several dishes with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved food. They ordered, and then an awkward silence settled between them. Victoria realized that despite the dramatic way they had met, they were essentially strangers about to embark on an elaborate pretense. "So," Jonathan said finally, "if we are going to convince people we are dating, I should probably know more about you than what I could find in a basic internet search." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "You searched for information about me?" "Of course. But I only found professional details. Your work at the Hartwell Museum, a few articles you wrote about Renaissance art, your graduate thesis on restoration techniques. Nothing personal." He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me something real. What made you choose art history?" The question surprised Victoria with its sincerity. She had expected surface-level conversation, not genuine curiosity. "My grandmother," she said after a moment. "She was a painter, never famous or successful, but incredibly talented. When I was young, she would take me to museums and teach me to really look at artwork, not just glance at it. She showed me how to see the stories hidden in brushstrokes, the emotions captured in color choices, the history preserved in every detail." "She sounds wonderful." She was. Victoria felt the familiar ache of loss. "She passed away when I was 16, but by then she had already given me this gift of seeing beauty in things other people might overlook. I knew I wanted to spend my life preserving that beauty for others." Jonathan listened with complete attention, and Victoria found herself appreciating that he did not immediately share his own story or try to one-up her experience. He simply listened. Layers beneath the surface. Their food arrived, and the conversation continued more naturally. Victoria asked about his company, and Jonathan explained the technical aspects of data security with surprising clarity. He had a gift for making complex topics understandable, and his passion for his work was evident in the way his entire demeanor changed when he talked about protecting information. "Most people think technology is cold and impersonal," he said, twirling pasta on his fork. "But to me, it is about protecting human connection. Every piece of data we secure represents someone's life, their memories, their private moments. When we protect that information, we are protecting their ability to trust and connect with others." I never thought about it that way, Victoria admitted. I always assumed tech entrepreneurs were more interested in profits than people. Some are. But most of us started because we saw a problem we wanted to solve. Jonathan set down his fork and met her eyes. My sister, Rachel, kept journals. Dozens of them, filled with her thoughts and dreams and fears. After she died, those journals became precious to my family. But I kept thinking about how much of our lives now exist digitally, and how vulnerable that information is. I wanted to create something that would protect those digital memories the way we protect physical ones. The raw honesty in his voice made Victoria see him differently. This was not just a wealthy man trying to save his reputation. This was someone who had experienced real loss and channeled it into something meaningful. The contract discussion. After dinner, they ordered coffee and Jonathan pulled out a folder from the bag he had brought. I had my lawyer draw up an agreement based on the conditions you mentioned. I want you to read it carefully and suggest any changes. Victoria took the document and began reading. It was surprisingly thorough and fair. The arrangement would last exactly 8 weeks, with the option to extend if both parties agreed. They would attend at least 2 public events together per week. All expenses related to their public appearances would be covered by Jonathan. There would be no physical contact beyond what was necessary for public appearances, and even that required mutual consent in the moment. Either party could terminate the agreement with 72 hours' notice. This section here, Victoria pointed to a paragraph near the end. It says you will make the museum donation regardless of whether I complete the full 8 weeks. Of course. That donation is not contingent on your performance. It is compensation for the disruption I caused to your life. Victoria felt something shift in her perception of Jonathan. She had expected him to use the donation as leverage, but instead he was treating it as a debt he owed. There is one thing I want to add, she said. I want a clause stating that if either of us starts to develop genuine feelings beyond this arrangement, we have to tell the other person immediately and discuss how to handle it. Jonathan looked surprised, then thoughtful. That is very wise. I will have my lawyer add that tomorrow. He paused, then added quietly, do you think that is likely to happen? I have no idea, Victoria said honestly. But I would rather have a plan for it than be caught off guard. The first public appearance. 3 days later, they attended their first event together as a couple. It was a gallery opening for a local artist, the kind of event where the art world intersected with wealth and society. Victoria wore a burgundy dress that Lily had insisted she buy for the occasion, and Jonathan arrived at her apartment to pick her up like a real date. You look beautiful, he said when she opened the door, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush despite herself. Thank you. You clean up well yourself. The gallery was crowded with people Victoria recognized from the art community. She saw the moment several of them noticed her arrival with Jonathan, saw the whispers spread through the room like ripples in water. But Jonathan handled it perfectly, introducing himself to people with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions about the artwork, and treating Victoria with a respect that never felt performative. At one point, as they stood examining a particularly striking abstract piece, Jonathan's hand settled naturally on the small of her back. The gesture was subtle, appropriate for the setting, but Victoria felt her heart rate increase at the contact. Are you comfortable with this? He murmured, close enough that only she could hear. Victoria realized he was asking permission even for this small touch, honoring the boundaries they had established. Yes. It looks natural. Tell me if that changes. Moments of connection. As the evening progressed, Victoria found herself genuinely enjoying Jonathan's company. He had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, making her laugh at unexpected moments. When an overly enthusiastic art collector cornered her with questions about authentication processes, Jonathan smoothly extracted her with a polite excuse about needing to catch another appointment. Thank you for the rescue, she said as they stepped outside for air. That man has been trying to get me to invest in his private collection for 2 years. I figured we could save each other." Jonathan loosened his tie slightly, looking relieved to be away from the crowd. "How do you think we did?" "Honestly? Better than I expected. You are surprisingly good at pretending to be interested in contemporary art." "Who says I was pretending?" Jonathan gestured back toward the gallery. "That piece we were looking at earlier, the blue and gold abstract. There was something compelling about it, the way the colors seemed to move even though they were static. I may not understand all the technical aspects, but I can appreciate beauty when I see it." The way he said the last part, while looking directly at her, made Victoria's breath catch. This was supposed to be pretend, she reminded herself. Just a business arrangement. But her heart did not seem to care about the distinction. Cracks in the armor. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a routine. Dinner twice a week, always at different restaurants to be seen by different crowds. Weekend appearances at charity events, art shows, and occasionally just walking through popular neighborhoods where photographers might spot them. Between public appearances, they texted frequently, sharing thoughts about their days and slowly building a genuine friendship. Victoria learned that Jonathan started every morning with a 3-mile run because it was the only time his mind felt truly quiet. That his favorite food was actually simple grilled cheese sandwiches, despite having access to the finest restaurants in the city. That he still kept Rachel's journals in a safe in his home office and read them when he felt lost. Jonathan learned that Victoria sang opera badly in the shower, that she had a weakness for old detective novels, and that she volunteered at a community art program for children every Saturday morning. He started showing up to help, claiming he wanted to be seen supporting her interests, but Victoria noticed he seemed to genuinely enjoy working with the kids. One evening, after a particularly long charity gala, they sat in Jonathan's car outside Victoria's apartment building. Neither of them moved to end the evening, both exhausted but strangely reluctant to part ways. "Can I ask you something personal?" Victoria said quietly. "Always. Do you ever regret building your company? Choosing work over relationships?" Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. "I used to think I did not have a choice. That success required sacrifice, and relationships were the price I had to pay. But watching you with those kids at the art program, seeing how you balance your career with genuine connections to people, I am starting to wonder if I was just afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of letting someone close enough to hurt me the way losing Rachel hurt." His voice was barely above a whisper. "It is easier to hide behind work than to risk that kind of pain again." Victoria reached over and took his hand without thinking. "I understand that. After my grandmother died, I buried myself in art history because it felt safer than forming new attachments. But loneliness is its own kind of pain." Their eyes met in the dim light of the car, and Victoria felt something shift between them. This was no longer pretend. Somewhere along the way, the fake relationship had developed real emotions. The confession. The next morning, Victoria called Jonathan before she could lose her courage. "We need to talk," she said when he answered. "About Clause 7 of our agreement." There was a pause. "The feelings clause." "Yes. Coffee shop in an hour?" They met at the same Brooklyn cafe where they had negotiated the original agreement. Victoria ordered her usual latte and tried to organize her thoughts while Jonathan sat across from her with an expression she could not quite read. "I need to be honest with you," Victoria began, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup for warmth. "This arrangement was supposed to be simple. 8 weeks of pretending, then back to our normal lives. But somewhere along the way, I stopped pretending." Jonathan leaned forward, his complete attention focused on her. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I have developed real feelings for you. The kind that are going to make it difficult to just walk away when our agreement ends." Victoria forced herself to meet his eyes. "According to our contract, I am supposed to tell you this immediately so we can figure out how to handle it." The truth revealed. Jonathan was quiet for a moment, then a slow smile spread across his face. Victoria, I stopped pretending about 3 weeks ago. I have just been terrified to tell you because I thought you were still following the script. You have feelings for me? Real ones. Complicated ones. The kind that make me want to call you every time something interesting happens, that make me look forward to our fake dates more than anything else in my week. He reached across the table and took her hand. I was planning to ask you tonight if you would consider extending our arrangement indefinitely, except making it real instead of fake. Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes, a mixture of relief and joy. So what do we do now? I think we start over. No more contract, no more pretending. Just two people who genuinely want to spend time together and see where this goes. Jonathan squeezed her hand gently. What do you think? I think that sounds terrifying and wonderful. Victoria smiled through her tears. But I have one condition. Name it. No more kissing without permission. If you want to kiss me, you ask first. Jonathan laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Deal. In that case, Victoria Hayes, may I have permission to kiss you right now? Yes. Yes, you may. A new beginning. The kiss was nothing like their first one in the hallway. This was tender and honest, full of promise rather than panic. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria rested her forehead against Jonathan's and laughed softly. This is going to complicate things, she said. The best things usually do. They spent the rest of the morning talking about what came next. No more fake dates, but real ones. No more performing for cameras, but genuine moments shared together. They would take things slowly, learn about each other without the pressure of public scrutiny, and build something authentic. The media would eventually lose interest in their story, Victoria knew. But by then, it would not matter because the story would have become real. 6 weeks earlier, a desperate moment had thrown them together. But it was the quiet moments afterward, the honest conversations and genuine connections, that had created something worth keeping. Epilogue, 3 months later. Victoria stood in the children's section of the Hartwell Museum, watching Jonathan help a group of 8-year-olds create their own abstract paintings. He had paint on his expensive watch and marker on his cheek, and he looked happier than she had ever seen him. The museum's new education wing, funded by his donation, had opened last week to wonderful reviews. But more importantly, it was filled every weekend with children discovering the joy of art, just as Victoria's grandmother had once taught her. Jonathan caught her watching and smiled, that same warm expression that had become so familiar over the past months. He excused himself from the children and walked over to her, completely unconcerned about the paint stains on his clothes. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, slipping his arm around her waist. "I am thinking about how strange life is. How one chaotic moment can lead to something beautiful if you are brave enough to see it through." "Are you talking about us or the museum wing?" "Both." Jonathan kissed her temple softly. "You know, my public relations team told me last week that the media has completely moved on from our story. We are officially boring news." "Good. I prefer boring." "Liar. You prefer interesting, which is why you gave a chance to a panicked billionaire who kissed you in a hallway." Victoria laughed and turned to face him fully. "I gave you a chance because underneath the panic, I saw someone genuine. Someone worth knowing. And now? Now I see someone I love." The words hung in the air between them, the first time either had said them out loud. Jonathan's expression softened with emotion. "I love you too," he said quietly. "Even though this whole thing started with me making the worst decision of my life, it led me to the best thing that ever happened to me." A small voice interrupted them. "Mr. Jonathan, I finished my painting. Do you want to see?" Jonathan squeezed Victoria's hand once more before turning back to the children. "I absolutely want to see. Show me what you created." Victoria watched him go, her heart full. Their story had started with chaos and confusion, with a kiss that was never meant to happen. But it had grown into something real and lasting, built on honesty and genuine connection. Sometimes the best love stories started in the most unexpected ways. And sometimes, when you were brave enough to turn a mistake into an opportunity, you discovered that what seemed like an ending was actually just the beginning. The end.